Hi, I wanted to do a quick video about Bitcoin and AI specifically. I'm not going to deep dive it too much, uh, but there is a narrative, especially on YouTube among influencers, that AI is on this sort of exponential growth curve, as is Bitcoin. They're two sort of uh, similar chimeras, right? They are being sold to people who want to sort of get rich quick, who don't understand the underlying technology involved. Now, quantum computing is different because that's actual technological innovation. Um, for example, what drove the personal computer boom in the 80s and 90s? Um, there was a lot of innovation. The microprocessor, operating systems developed in the 70s, Windows, and so forth. There was a lot of actual new technology that was based on science. So it's like new science comes, then new technologies layers on top of that, and then you have like commercial applications, right? So it's the science, the technology to implement that science, and the business applications on top of that, right? So you had actual technological innovation when it came to uh, personal computers, for example. Now, with cryptocurrency, there hasn't been a huge amount of innovation. Um, what is cryptocurrency after all? It's essentially distributed databases. Blockchain, ledger, distributed ledger technology. So there have been some innovations. 2013 or so, they developed smart contracts, which was a clever idea, but that was over 10 years ago now. So there's not a lot of kind of technological innovation. It's just basically a Ponzi scheme. It's like you're trying to find the greater fool to, if I buy Bitcoin at $100,000, I need to find somebody who's going to buy it from me at 110, so I make a $10,000 profit, right? Um, it's not innovating in terms of new technology. It's simply uh, trying to find somebody to offload things on. There is some limited utility to Bitcoin for sure, in terms of helping to facilitate payments and so on, between institutions. Uh, but the problem there is security. That if your main claim to fame is that you can facilitate payments between institutions, you better be secure, and Bitcoin is not secure. With quantum computing coming down the pipeline, that will be able to break Bitcoin's encryption probably by 2030. Uh, the only real value Bitcoin has, which is security, is not even that secure. So it's essentially one big Ponzi scheme. And AI too, it's basically these large language models, LLMs, which are interesting, but they're based on foundations of neural networks, kind of feed forward neural networks, um, that really were developed in the 80s and 90s. Um, uh, they've just scaled them up with a lot new hardware, a lot of hardware, billions and billions of dollars of hardware, and billions of training data, right? So it's all about training data. It's about getting AI to recognize patterns, right? But there's only so much data out there. Now, it's starting to sort of hit a limit of training data. There's sort of a data wall. It uh, has reached really the amount of training data available to it. So it's not going to be able to get that much more clever. And so the answer to that is throw more hardware at it. But there's a limit to the hardware too. I mean, there's cost to this stuff. Um, environmental regulations, all kinds of stuff. There just simply isn't the physical hardware necessary to fund more exponential AI growth, right? So it's running out of data. It's running out of hardware. There's really nowhere else to go without algorithmic improvements. Um, and that's kind of a separate conversation. But LLMs, which is what ChatGPT uses, what most kind of the common man thinks of when they hear AI is basically these LLMs. Those are limited because they've sort of eaten up all the data they could ever eat up. They've eaten up all the hardware they could ever use. So throwing more hardware, more data at them will only get you so far. Now, that's an analogous situation to Bitcoin and other types of cryptocurrency. They need more suckers to come into the pipeline to offload these things onto, right? Any asset goes up if there's more people who want to buy than to sell, and it goes down, there's more people who want to sell than to buy, right? So for Bitcoin to go up to say $1 million or whatever, $10 million, you need a lot more buyers than there are now. So you got scammers like Michael Saylor talking about how Bitcoin will go up infinitely. Well, there's not an infinite amount of people in the world. you know, uh, you know, all Ponzi schemes since always come to an end because there's no more suckers. Alexander supposed to have wept when he had no more lands to conquer. It's probably an apocryphal tale, but you take the point. It sooner or later runs out of suckers. So Bitcoin itself is kind of hitting a limit. And I think that we may potentially be going into recession. In fact, we already are. The first quarter GDP was negative GDP growth, based largely self-inflicted wounds, tariffs, uh, government budget cuts, and so forth. So, because of self-inflicted wounds, for the most part, we are going into recession really already. Certainly, technology is in a recession already, I believe, in terms of the job market and so forth. Um, so, Bitcoin is a risk-on asset, not a risk-off asset. That means in a recession, you want to buy safe things. You want to buy physical things, gold, silver, commodities. We want to buy, grain, cattle, things that exist in the real world. Um, real estate, um, maybe, federally insured savings accounts and certificates of deposits and so on. That's where you want to put your money in a recession. You don't want to put your money into a Ponzi scheme and hope there's going to be more suckers. So people who are selling Bitcoin as a recession-proof instrument are intentionally misleading. And again, beyond the short-term problems of Bitcoin going into recession, it just simply only works if there's more people piling on to the Ponzi scheme. And there will be a limit, like I said earlier, with quantum computing. Now, it takes rounding up, I'm not going to get into the exact numbers, about 2,500 qubits, quantum bits, to crack the public-private key encryption. So if you have a public key, you can reverse engineer that and get the private key, get the secret password essentially, if you have a quantum computer with 2,500 error-corrected qubits. Error-corrected qubits means a logical qubit is what it's called, but it just means that it can operate without errors. And generally, and this is a conservative estimate, at least last time I was looking at this stuff, you might have a 100-to-1 ratio between physical qubits and logical qubits. So IBM has like 1,400, 1,500, whatever the number is of qubits with its Condor computer, I think. Like, these are rough numbers. Let's just say 1,500. So 100-to-1 ratio means they might have 15 logical qubits, error-corrected qubits of computing power. And again, those numbers might be better now. Maybe it's 10-to-1. So maybe instead of only having 15 logical qubits for a 1,500 physical qubits, they have 150 qubits. But, we can say 100-to-1 ratio. So if it takes 2,500 logical, that is to say error-corrected qubits, to crack the public-private key encryption of Bitcoin, you could conceivably see a quantum computer with 250,000 physical qubits able to crack Bitcoin. Because 250,000, divided by 100, that's 2,500. Unfortunately for Bitcoin, Psi Quantum, PSI, Psi Quantum, is using photon or light-based quantum computing to be able to scale better. They're building a big sort of infrastructure in Chicago on a site of a former steel mill. I forgot exactly where it is, but it's a major project out there, and it'll be open by 2029, 2030. and they're aiming to have 1 million physical qubits. And they'll probably by then have done better with error correction. So it's not going to be 100 to 1. It might be more like 10 to 1. So 1 million qubits, they might have the equivalent of 100,000 logical qubits. But even at the 100 to 1 numbers, that's still a lot. That's still 10,000. 1 million physical qubits, 10,000 logical qubits. So if I just said there's 2,500 logical qubits to crack Bitcoin, well, the Psi quantum computer in Chicago in about 4 or 5 years is going to have at least minimal conservative numbers 4 times the amount of logical qubits you need to crack Bitcoin. And as I could see them doing a demonstration, I could see like the chief scientist of Psi Quantum buying himself, $10 worth of Bitcoin in his private wallet just for demo purpose, and some other developer has another wallet, and he uses the quantum computer to sort of steal from his own wallet using the public key and reverse engineering the private key and transferring it to his developer friend just as a demonstration. They're not going to hack the Satoshi keys, the early wallets of Bitcoin attributed to Satoshi Nakamoto, who is probably like a couple different people. It wasn't just one person, and that's a separate conversation too. There's one guy who wrote the white paper, one guy who wrote the early code, and they weren't the same person, most likely. It's been a while since I've sort of deep dived that. So this is not a video about who Satoshi Nakamoto is, but um, the best theory I saw is there's a couple of different um, individuals. It's like Lynn Salzman or something like that. Lynn something or another passed away now, but he probably wrote the early code. Um, and then there's I think Nick Szabo was the British guy who probably wrote the early white paper. So anyway, there wasn't one Satoshi, but Sosserman or something like that, Lynn Sosserman. Um, but anyway, these early wallets with Nick Szabo and Lynn Sosserman and all these people um, had 1 million bitcoins in them or whatever. I don't think Psi Quantum is going to try to do that. They'll just probably do a small demonstration, right? But even just showing that these types of wallets are vulnerable is enough to crash the market. So the Bitcoin parade comes to an end when Psi Quantum comes online, right? And which is like 29, 2030, 4 or 5 years from now. So this is not really a secret. I'm not telling something that developers in the Bitcoin world don't know. Um, and there's a lot of just cynicism that they know and they don't care because they think, well, I'm gonna sell my Bitcoin in 2028 or 2029 right before the crash, right? A lot of these people, I mean, some people are in denial. People like Michael Saylor, who's a complete scam artist and believes his own delusions. Yeah, he'll go down with the ship and he deserves to. I mean, I think if you want to make some money, short MicroStrategy, right? I mean, it's like I don't play around with markets or whatever myself, but I just if somebody were so inclined, and there's that old saying, the markets can be irrational for longer than you can stay solvent. So if you're able to, you know, take the ride or take those risks, shorting MicroStrategy is a good thing because it will go broke, right? Because their entire corporate strategy for MicroStrategy is in Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin goes down, MicroStrategy goes down too. Um, but other than some diehard scam artists like Michael Saylor, a lot of the more intelligent developers in the Bitcoin space know what I just said. Know that quantum computers are coming online, and that's the end of the line. But they think they can get out in time. They can, find a sucker to offload their bitcoins on, but before it all comes to an end, right? Um, and they say, oh well, Bitcoin can fork and stuff, but um, they can't migrate all the coins, right? They're still going to lose a lot of coins. The only way to do it is to start over, create a new Bitcoin that is uses algorithms that aren't the elliptical curve algorithms that quantum computers can't hack, right? Because quantum computing is based on the Schrodinger equation, right? They can only hack linear. How do I say this? They can only hack encryption schemes based on linear equations, right? So things like factoring, which is the type of encryption that Bitcoin is based on, elliptical curves, the same kind of idea. Um, they can't hack more uh, complicated algorithms like the shortest vector problem, for example, right? So there's quantum secure encryption. So they're really they have to start over again and make basically a new Bitcoin with quantum secure encryption. But they're not going to do that because these people, for the most part, are not serious people. They're just scam artists. They're not interested in building better technology. They're interested in making as much money as they can while they can, and then flying off to Central America into a country without extradition treaties. Um, so there's an expiration date on Bitcoin. Um, Going back to AI, AI's had problems before. I mean, 1968, Marvin Minsky published a book saying Frank Rosenblatt's perceptron system, which was the leading AI of its day, could not solve the XOR problem, XOR problem, which is a pretty basic problem to be able to solve. And because it couldn't do this basic thing, the perceptron fell out of favor. And then Rosenblatt, unfortunately, tragically died early, and basically died before he could fix his system and solve those problems. So AI kind of went away in the 1970s, and then it started. Some new techniques were developed in the 1980s, and it came back. So AI has always ebbed and flowed. Okay. Um, and I think LLMs, ChatGPT, I think they're hitting a ceiling now, and I think we're going to have another 20-year. I mean, there are ideas to improve these things and get away from LLMs, and maybe I could speculate myself. For one thing, they're feed forward, and I think really, if you want to have anything approaching human level intelligence, you don't need feed forward. You need recurrent nets, like the Hopfield nets, and there's other ideas too. I certainly haven't deep dived all the ideas. So there's plenty of ideas out there of how to move beyond the current architectures. But right now, Sam Altman, people like that, they don't want to invest in new algorithms. They just want to throw more data, more hardware. Because it's easier to throw more data and hardware at stuff than to kind of go back to the drawing board and come up with better algorithms. So Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, like I said, they have, I guess, a couple problems. A near-term problem of we're going into a recession and it's not recession-proof. So they're probably going to lose money anyway get the recession. And then 4 or 5 years come and they're going to hit the quantum computing wall. And then that will pretty much be the end. They're going to really have to retool completely. I don't think cryptocurrency will go away, but I think there will be a large divestment of institutions like BlackRock getting out of Bitcoin and saying, hey, we're going to get out of this until you guys fix this quantum computing problem. And like I said, um, Bitcoin is filled with people in denial about the existence of quantum computing, pretty much flat earth level ignorance like Michael Saylor, or they're filled with people that are aware of the problem and just don't care. Andreas Antopoulos is probably one of those. I think he is aware of the problem and he just doesn't give a flying monkey fuck because he's rich and he's going to sell his bitcoins and get out of it before there's a problem. So I think Antopoulos is somebody who knows there's a problem and doesn't give a hoot. Saylor is somebody who's deluded himself into knowing that there's not a problem. So whether they're outright scammers like Saylor or people who just, or well like Antopoulos, or people who are very, very delusional and also scammers like Saylor, for one reason or another, this problem will not be fixed and Bitcoin will go down. And yeah, there'll be other projects arising in the ashes that, like I said, use better encryption that cannot be cracked by quantum computing. But that will just be a long process. So people say, oh, well, there's a recession coming, and so the way to avoid the recession is to buy Bitcoin or buy AI stocks. That will somehow be a magical thing to uh, immunize oneself from the carnage that's coming. And that's not happening. If you want to invest in technology, it's not immune to recession. It will still get some ups and downs, but quantum computing, because that's an actual innovation. AI, yes, it will innovate in the future, but right now it's stagnated. Bitcoin is not really innovating at all, and it's just a Ponzi scheme. As far as quantum computing goes, not to get too technical, but you really want to invest in the quantum internet because that's the real thing. And I'll just very briefly explain why. If I have two regular computers with like 100 arbitrary processing units, like units of processing power, just arbitrary units, and I wire them together. So I have like a miniature internet of two computers with 100 processing units each. Okay. So I have 100 plus 100 processing units because I wired them together for a total of 200 processing units. Quantum computing is different. If I wire two quantum computers with 100 arbitrary units each together, I don't have 100 plus 100. I have 100 times 100 arbitrary units. So I would have, in that example, 10,000 arbitrary units, right? So when it has to do with quantum entanglement. I'm not going to get into it, but when I wire quantum computers together, it's not like wiring regular computers together. If I have 10 regular computers that I've wired together, I still have 10 computers that can communicate and share files, but they're still like 10 separate uh, entities. But if I wire 10 quantum computers together, it's like I have one major entity. It's like all 10 computers that could be in different rooms or even different continents, but they're all sort of acting coherently together. It's like I have one big supercomputer, not 10 small computers, right? That's the idea. If I wire 10 regular computers together, yeah, I can share files, but I still have 10 small computers. But if I have 10 quantum computers wired together, it's like I have one supercomputer. It becomes like this multiplying factor, um, such that the computing power of the sort of wired together set of quantum computers is much greater than the sum of all those 10 quantum computers, right? That's the thing. Classical computers, regular computers, wired together, it's the sum processing power is not bigger than the sum of its parts, but in quantum computing, it is much bigger than the sum of its parts. Um, and of course, China is ahead of us, honestly, in the quantum internet. We have the bigger quantum computers, IBM and so forth, but China sees this and it sees it. He who wins the internet race in quantum computing. It's not he who builds the biggest machine. It's he who knows how to wire the machines together in a efficient and error-free kind of way, or at least fewer errors. No such thing as error-free, but fewer errors. So building the fiber optic cables and stuff like that. So if you want to, not that I don't give financial advice, but if you want to make some money with quantum computers, find some Chinese quantum internet companies, throw some money into that, right? Or just you know find a quantum computing oriented ETF that's just kind of a basket of stocks and throw money into that. Um, I wouldn't invest in any one particular company because that's too risky. Um, One thing I'll say is D Wave. They are very popular, but they are basically specialized in quantum annealing, which is not a general purpose type of quantum computer. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of it. I'm just going to say that quant D Wave um, does not really build general purpose quantum computers. They build sort of specialized computers, which is fine, but they're just not as flexible as other types of quantum computers, such as that IBM is building. Right. So I've only mentioned that because D Wave is getting a lot of press lately, and a lot of people don't understand that nuance that they're really not the general purpose types of computers that IBM is building, for example, or that Psi Quantum that I mentioned earlier is building. And again, I'm not giving financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but I would say first and foremost buy ETFs, quantum ETFs. You can Google those, um, and that might have some utility. Yes, we're going into recession, but I think some of those will survive, and they'll go up and down. But say 5 years from now, might come out on top. And also, I have not researched this personally, but if there were any sort of publicly owned companies that were exposed to the Chinese quantum internet, that's really the way to go as well. And especially with the current political climate, not to say too much about that, but that's becoming more and more xenophobic, and closing its door to foreign students. Well, where do you think those smart people from all over the world are going to go if they can't come to Harvard and Yale and Stanford anymore? They're going to go to China, right? And then it's going to be a brain drain. Instead of the best and brightest in the world coming to the United States, which has helped make us a powerhouse for technology, they're going to go to China, and China is going to get way the heck ahead of us in the quantum race. And I don't really give a hoot, honestly, about geopolitics in terms of who comes out on top. I really don't care. Um, but it is, it's another example of America creating self-inflicted wounds on itself. Uh, so anyway, for various reasons, China is very much ahead of us. Will stay ahead of us in the quantum computing race, especially with the quantum internet. So again, there's a lot of knowledge out there, or it's not unknown that we're heading into recession, and so it gives YouTube influencers an opportunity um, to get out there and say, "Oh well, avoid the recession by buying this cryptocurrency. Everybody else will be poor, but you'll be rich because you have this cryptocurrency or you have this AI stock." No, it's all a scam. You buy Bitcoin, you'll be as poor as anyone else. You buy AI stocks, you'll be as poor as anyone else. And probably even if you buy quantum, nobody is going to get out of this completely unscathed. But I'm just saying, long term, quantum has a much better future than AI. I think AI is done for 20 years. I really do. I mean, yeah, there'll be incremental improvements through a little bit more hardware here and there, but what they really need is algorithmic improvement, and that could take 20, 30 years, maybe 40 years. I don't know. And maybe, who knows how long that will take, but it's going to be a long time um, before we see much more movement in AI. And like I said before, Bitcoin is done basically structurally because it's not about um, technological innovation. It's about being a Ponzi scheme, first of all, and second of all, even as a Ponzi scheme, it's not secure because it's not interested in fixing its vulnerability to quantum computing attacks. So this whole point of this video is there's a lot of misinformation that somehow buying Bitcoin or buying AI will make you immune to the recession that's coming or that's already here and it's getting worse, and it will not. If you want some um, long-term upside that is going to, maybe beat the S&P potentially. I mean, there's no guarantees, but quantum computing is where some actual innovation is being done. And historically, where do you do well in the stock market is when you invest into real innovation, not little flash in the pan Ponzi schemes. You did well. People did well in the 80s and 90s investing into personal computers because there was real innovation. And similarly, there's real innovation going on in quantum computing, and that's why I think it's going to do well. Um, but again, in the near term, nothing can stop the self-inflicted wounds of tariffs and budget cuts and so on. And again, the brain drain of people going to other countries because of the kind of the xenophobia that's here in the United States right now. So um, we're going into some tough times, and Bitcoin and AI will not save you, right? So if you want to hunker down for the hard times, it's gold, it's silver, it's commodities, just physical things, real estate, and good old fashioned FDIC insured savings accounts, and you want some more interest rates, go with some certificates of deposit. But there's no easy answers right now. So anyway, just kind of a short video to say that AI is really hitting a ceiling. Certainly not going to take everyone's job in 5 years, nor will it make you a billionaire in 5 years. Right? It's just kind of hit a ceiling. Um, it'll innovate and it'll live to innovate another day, but it's, goes in these waves, and we're kind of past the wave right now. We're going into the trough. We're going into an AI winter right now. And Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme structurally anyway. It's not really technological innovation. It's just trying to find suckers to buy tokens. Um, and they will be put down, if you will, put out of their misery by quantum computing. And again, very specifically by at least 4 or 5 years from now, when Psi Quantum in Chicago comes online specifically. But there could be others coming from China that I don't know about, that nobody knows about. That China could come out with a computer next week that could sink Bitcoin. So anything between now and 2030, but Bitcoin's time is limited. And so that's just something to bear in mind. So thank you.